It doesn't surprise me to see Hogan with the Republicans because Hogan's as anti-union as you can get. There still is not a union in professional wrestling.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
I mentioned earlier in the program, you know, I have I love to hate on Hulk Hogan. Terrible person. And I am not alone. Looks like the WWE fandom is right there with me in their hate for Hulk Hogan, which is great. It speaks very highly of the people who attend these WWE functions. Let's take a look at this clip at how Hulk Hogan was received at a recent WWE event.
Well, let me tell you something, brother.
Yeah, not welcome there, actually. So that was really cool. You know, I'm not as big a wrestling fan as I used to be. You know, I used to watch wrestling fairly regularly, and so I'm not totally sure. Like I think that at one point in his career, Hulk Hogan was like a heel, right, Adam? Like he was the bad guy in the stories, you know? Isn't that right? Or was he always the good guy?
Well, he had his heel turn with WCW when he was part of the New World Order, the NWO.
Okay,
yeah, that was the big hook, right? Was Hulk Hogan, you know, in the 80s and into the mid 90s, they did this whole Hulkamania thing and made him out to be a real American hero, you know, vanquishing America's foes and standing up for truth and justice. Yes, absolutely. And so, yeah, that was definitely, you know, the thing was after building him up as the baby face, so to speak, for all these years, the hero, you know, he went bad for a while with WCW, and then of course they brought back the whole Hulkamania thing, and seems like he still
his
still
most
rides
recent
that.
Okay, his most recent thing was not the heel turn, so it's probably
no.
So
this was 20 years ago at least. You know, he definitely they revived. As far as I know, like he kind of retired back under the Hulkamania,
right?
You know, good guy label.
Okay. So they weren't booing him as part of the bit, right? They were booing him because they don't like him.
Hopefully, they were booing him because he is garbage.
Okay.
I'm gonna assume that's why, and I I hope that's why. But yeah, he is total scab. He ratted out his fellow wrestlers when they tried to unionize. I believe it was WrestleMania 2, ahead of WrestleMania 2, which, you know, would have been a huge source of leverage.
Yeah.
So yeah, I see a comment in the chat. The First Amendment was a Roddy Piper fan. I was as well.
Oh, okay.
Roddy Piper, big fan of him growing up. And if y'all have never seen one of the only movies that I'm aware of that he was in, They Live, John Carpenter sci-fi movie from the 80s. You know, easy to dismiss as kind of a cheesy B movie, but it is a fantastic movie starring the great Roddy Piper. Anyway, we can go off on these rabbit holes easily whenever you bring up wrestling, but it's always good to remind folks
was in Hell
the
Comes
wrestler. I was going to say the wrestlers definitely deserve a union.
Yes.
They are independent contractors. They are not employees of WWE. That is wild, totally wild. And this billion-dollar industry and Vince McMahon becoming a billionaire has been built off the backs of these wrestlers and their labor. And in many cases, like giving their bodies and lives to this profession. And
Right.
so, yeah, it's fun to joke about and laugh about. It's all silly, but these are human beings who have been
Right.
exploited in a major, major way. And the biggest mark in the business is the wrestlers because they're the ones
Right.
being taken advantage of and making all the money.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
Yeah,
For
let's
other
play this
people.
clip from Ventura where he talks about what Hulk did to him and to, like you said, I mean, the rest of the wrestlers. I mean, ultimately, Jesse Ventura and Hulk Hogan, both of them, like, they're doing fine, right? But there's dozens, hundreds of people who are, who are chewed up and spit out, basically, for the entertainment of people. And they're not respected in the same way that many other professional athletes are. Let's play this from Ventura.
As far as Hogan goes, it doesn't surprise me because when I was in wrestling in the 80s, I tried to unionize wrestling, and it was Hulk Hogan who cut my legs out from under me. Hulk Hogan went to Vince McMahon, ratted me out, and subsequently later on cost me my job. So it doesn't surprise me to see Hogan with the Republicans because Hogan's as anti-union as you can get. There still is not a union in professional wrestling. The reason I tried to do it, I was in an elevator and ran into Gene Upshaw, the great tackle guard from the Oakland Raiders.
Right.
And Big Gene raised his finger up and looked at me and says, you boys need to form a union. I tried to do it, and it was Hulk Hogan who ratted me out to Vince McMahon, and subsequently I was fired and lost my job.
Yeah, so there you go. And like he said, it's still the case to this day. And professional athletes in other leagues, like the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, they take where professional athletes are unionized, they are able to bring in approximately like 50% of the revenue that the sports generate. In non-union professional athletics like the WWE or the UFC, they only bring in like 20%, right? And so, on top of that, they don't have the healthcare and they don't have the pension and all this other stuff that the other professional athletes do. But just, that one statistic there really should show you how much these folks are getting screwed. And Hulk Hogan helped them do that. And so, I think that probably a lot of the antagonism at the place was due in part to just kind of the raw politics of it. But the politics come from a place, right? Hulk Hogan wasn't like a big Trump guy just for no reason. It's because he's a conservative millionaire, kind of, and that's how he perceives himself. And, so that's where his endorsement of Trump came from. It came from this anti-union, conservative, individualistic mindset that he has. I'll step on other people to get to the top.
Right. And there's always going to be those kind of people we have to deal with as we navigate our lives in the workforce. The company man, right, who is willing to snitch out other people, rat on other people in order to get their own, foot in the door or, leg up, And you're right. There are people who are willing to step on other folks to get to the top. But thankfully, I don't think that's most people. Maybe that's me being a little bit soft-hearted, but I think most people are not really that way. And I do think collective organizing is a way to counteract that kind of behavior. The more folks come together and see their common shared interests and see their self-interest bound up with others, right? And can see how their own personal situation will benefit. And I think you're correct to point to professional sports because, LeBron James, for example, is a union member. And we often hear that unions, you can't get ahead if you're in the union. Hard work isn't honored, talent isn't recognized. Well, LeBron James, whatever you think of him, has been one of the greatest basketball talents in the last several decades, and his contracts reflect that.
Right.
He still makes more money than someone riding the bench who never gets, a minute of playing time. So clearly, even in a union environment, they have structured their collective bargaining in a way that, the more talented, the ones who bring, more value, quote unquote, which is all subjective, of course, but there's room, there's that flexibility. So I think that's something that's also really frustrating about the whole Hulk Hogan situation. It's not as if you couldn't have been rich under a unionized environment, right? To your point, the wrestlers would have brought home more of the revenue being generated. There's a bigger pie to be distributed.
Right.
Because the owners aren't just gobbling up the whole pie and leaving you with the crumbs to divvy up among yourselves. So yeah, that's very frustrating. The wrestlers need a union. I do want to take this opportunity to plug an article from Jacobin all the way back in 2014. It's over a decade old now, but it's called Money in the Bank by Dan O'Sullivan. It's the story of pro wrestling in the 20th century as the story of American capitalism. And it's a very interesting dive into some of the early roots of wrestling and how it's always been, a very cartel kind of operation and relied on this hyper exploitation of the talent. And I guess my final observation is that even if you think, well, this isn't really sports, maybe you shouldn't compare it to the NBA. Actors have unions.
Right. Yeah.
Actors Equity is a member of the AFL-CIO and right, SAG-AFTRA. So look, whether you want to classify them more as the actor or more as an athlete, either way, they deserve a union, as all workers do, because it's their labor that creates the value.
Right.
So I think it's interesting, and I think that we need Jesse Ventura on the Valley Labor Report. As someone who grew up watching wrestling, I think it would be fun to have more of these conversations about the intersection of labor and politics with this phenomenon of professional wrestling.
Yeah, somebody mentioned in the chat that Hulk Hogan has a beer. It probably tastes terrible. He came to Huntsville to hawk his wares, and I think me and Adam were about this close from going to one of these events where he's giving out his beer just for the opportunity to call him a scab to his face. But ultimately, we had to work. So,
right, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It was like I really, really wanted to do it, but I wasn't gonna take off work to go call him a scab to his face and waste half a tank of gas.
Yeah.
If it had been more convenient, absolutely. But Hulk is not worth my effort or my gas. He's trash. So.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.